Okay, this is the first video for Exercise2d, as in dog. We are going to go through game states, so the state of our world, as well as how to create some informative menus and also switch between scenes. So this is the end of 1C. And so the first thing I'm going to do is enable myself to have a main menu, which is going to exist in its own scene, and switch between them, and then I'll set up a main menu. So the first thing I'm going to do is in Assets, Scenes, I am going to create a new scene. And I'm going to call it Start, capital S, and I'm going to right click and create another new scene called End. And before I start setting up these scenes, I am going to go to File, Build Settings, and I'm going to drag them in, because if we want to switch scenes, they must be in Build Settings so that the overarching project knows that there are scenes. They have index numbers. I clicked and dragged this to Start, so I have Start, Sample Scene, and End 0, 1, 2. We will refer to these by name, not number, but it's good to know that they're in this order. And so that's that setup. So I'm going to double click on Start. Start begins and is now empty. There's nothing in it. And we are going to add some functionality and some menus. And very amateurish title screen. So the first thing I'm going to do to start creating user interface is I'm going to create a title. So I'm going to right click on the hierarchy, go to UI, and then select Text Mesh Pro. Unity no longer has the vanilla text system. That's a very old one. Text Mesh Pro is an asset that many people use, and Unity bought them. It is now just part of the system. So I'm going to select Text Mesh Pro, and you see now I have this yellow box here. So the weird thing about Unity UI is that it is gigantic and also exists in the same scene, but it's in a different scale. So while Unity stuff is in meter world units, UI uses world units as pixels. And that's just a quirk of the system. We're just going to have to let it go. For ease of use, I'm going to take my animator and my animation and just drag them into there so I have a bigger editor space. So, first thing I'm going to do, so all Unity UI stuff runs off of this thing called a canvas. So when I created a new Text Mesh Pro, I created a canvas. I'm going to rename this to be title so I know what it is. I'm going to edit it in a second, but first I'm going to go to Canvas, and I want to change some stuff. So this has three modes: overlay and camera, and also world space. So if you want hovering text over a character's head, you would create a Text Mesh Pro object and a canvas, but you would change the canvas to world space, and then you could child it to an existing thing. The one thing you want to do whenever you do anything in Unity UI system is change this canvas scaler from constant pixel size to scale with screen size. You always want to do that. And then also, I don't want to have my base to be 800 by 600. 1080p, which is pretty much the standard now, or higher, is actually 1920 by 1080. This will give me a correct 16 by 9 size. And I'm going to Control S. So before I do anything else, also let me point out that when I created that, it created this thing called Event System. So we've talked about Unity events in terms of on update and on start and on collision enter and on trigger enter. Confusingly enough, Unity has a second event system, which is the system that it uses for inputs and clicking on things. So just so you know, event system is not the game object event system. It is a different event system, which we will be not interfacing with directly. It just has to be sitting in the scene, or no, like mouse clicks on buttons will register. So I'm going to go to my title, and this is a component that has the TextMesh Pro component on it. It's got a whole bunch of settings. I will set some of those today. But first thing I'm going to do is game objects have vector 3s, but these things have this thing called rect transform, which has a bunch of different other positions. There is a Z position, but it doesn't do much. There's a width and a height, and there are these things called anchors. For the sake of this, I'm not going to talk much about these, but one thing that is very useful is hitting this anchor presets. So right now, new text is just kind of sitting in space. And let's jazz this up. Totally not asteroids. So that's pretty small and doesn't really fill up my screen. So first thing I do is actually hit Alt to set an anchor position, and then also just the position that will put it there. And so now my anchor's in the center of the screen, so positive X and positive Y are now in relation to the center line. So I can put it in corners, I can put it in the center here, but I'm really just going to click and drag it to kind of middle of the top here. And then I can grab these white things, click and drag on them. Weirdly enough, the size of the object is these blue circles, but the handles are actually how the text renders. So let's make it a bit bigger, like 96, and then stretch these out, and then I'm gonna hit center, so now it's more or less centered. To really center it, I'm going to drag these actually all the way to the sides. Now my text is totally centered, and then I hit play. There we go. It looks gross because scale starts at 1.3 for some reason. If I scale it down normally, there it is. Nice and anti-aliased. Looks good. Well, no, it looks bad, but it looks okay for demo purposes. So now I want to add a button that lets me start my game. So I'm going to click on Canvas, right-click, go to UI, and then Button TextMesh Pro. That creates a button in the center. That's good enough for me. I can look at a child of button, which is a TextMesh Pro object. I'm going to change it to Start. And now, if I hit play, it changes color slightly. I can click on it. It changes color when I click down on it. So the button is clickable, but it doesn't do anything. So let's make it advance to our game when we hit start. So I'm going to go to the button itself. I'm going to hit add component and create a script machine. And I'm going to call this new visual script. I'm going to call it Start Asteroid. I'm going to edit it. Actually, let's not edit it first. Let's do the other bit. So to tie into this event system, I have a button component, and the button component has this on-click thing. So whenever I click on the button, it can do stuff. You can also edit its tints and if it highlights or not. But I'm going to hit this plus, which gives me this box. And so I'm going to drag the button onto this none object. I want it to run a script that's on itself. I could also have it affect a bunch of other things. And I could also do things like game objects set active. So if I would do that and unchecked, what it's going to do is set itself to be not active, and it will disappear. So that's a thing you can do directly without using scripts, is you can just access certain things that these already have on them. Game object, transforms, renderer, etc. But what I'm going to do is instead of set active, I'm going to go to script machine, and I am going to trigger Unity event. And I'm going to say play. Now, trigger Unity event is slightly the same. It is different than custom events. So if I go to edit graph, now before we do something like trigger or we do custom event, but what I really want is Unity event. So this is slightly different. It gets no arguments. It's just an event. Yep, let's make sure. So I call it play. And now let me show you how to debug. One quick thing to make sure that things are running is I can do debug log. And I'm going to pull out of that a string literal. I'm just going to say hit play button. Save it. I'm going to run. I hit the button. And down here in the corner or in the console, you can see it said hit play button. So to review, on button, I've set in here, I had it reference itself and said then trigger Unity event onto the script machine and gave it a name. And then in script machine, I gave it a Unity event, not a custom event, a Unity event, and play. And then I attached a log to it so you could see it could run. Now, instead of that, what I'm going to do is go to scene, manager, load scene. And I'm really just going to load scene name. And our name of our scene is sample scene. So now instead of debug logging, it will load a scene. And I hit, and now it loaded that scene, and now I'm playing. So that is how to make a main scene and how to switch scenes around. The next video I will talk about displaying the player state to, or the game state to the player.